Hello mates, welcome to the West 6 Mixology podcast. I'm Scotty Clark and our show today is about creating the perfect Peachy Prosecco Bellini that brings genuine elegance to your holiday brunch celebrations. Picture this, a tiny bar in Venice, barely 60 square meters, where Hemingway nursed his martinis and Orson Welles plotted his next film. The year's just after the war, and Giuseppe Cipriani's standing behind the mahogany, holding a perfectly ripe white peach like it's a stolen diamond. He cuts it, presses it through a sieve, watches the pink pale puree settle into a glass. Then comes the Prosecco, slow and deliberate, creating this gorgeous gradient from coral at the bottom to champagne gold at the top. He slides it across the bar and names it after a Renaissance painter who knew a thing or two about capturing light. That drink, that moment, is the Bellini. And here's the beautiful irony. What Cipriani created as a seasonal speciality for Venetian aristocrats became the calling card of bottomless brunches worldwide. Somewhere between Harry's Bar and your local bistro, this delicate masterpiece got a bit of a reputation problem. So let's set the record straight about what a proper Bellini actually is, why it matters, and how the version you've probably been drinking is probably missing the entire point. Giuseppe Cipriani wasn't just a bartender. He was an artist who happened to work with alcohol instead of oils. When he opened Harry's Bar in the early 1930s with money borrowed from a wealthy American named Harry Pickering, he had a philosophy. Food and drink should be considered art forms. This wasn't just marketing talk. The man named his beef carpaccio after the Venetian painter Vittore Carpaccio because the raw red meat reminded him of the colours in Carpaccio's paintings. So when Cipriani created the Bellini sometime in the late 1940s, the naming wasn't casual. Giovanni Bellini was one of the most important painters of the Venetian Renaissance, famous for his revolutionary use of colour, his ability to capture that luminous, glowing quality of Venetian light and flesh tones. Cipriani saw in his drink's distinctive pink-white colour a resemblance to the toga worn by a saint in one of Bellini's paintings. The cocktail was, essentially, a liquid tribute to Venetian artistry. But here's what makes the story fascinating. Post-war Venice was experiencing this cultural renaissance, this return to beauty and celebration after years of austerity. The international jet set was descending on Harry's Bar, artists and writers and aristocrats, all looking for that ineffable thing Cipriani seemed to bottle: elegance without pretension, luxury without stuffiness. The Bellini fit perfectly into this moment. It wasn't about getting drunk. It was about experiencing something beautiful, something that captured the essence of summer in the Veneto region. Cipriani insisted on using only white peaches, and only when they were in season, which meant the Bellini was exclusive, temporary, precious. You couldn't just order one in January. You had to wait for late summer when the white peaches were so ripe they were practically bursting, when you could smell them from across the market. And for decades, the Bellini remained this closely guarded specialty. Other bars tried to replicate it, but Cipriani's son, Arrigo, has said in interviews that most of them got it wrong, using yellow peaches, using peach nectar from a can, using peach schnapps for heaven's sake. The drink became famous, but also diluted. By the time the brunch culture boom hit in the 80s and 90s, Bellini meant something completely different. Bottomless mimosa's fruity cousin. Something to drink while you're waiting for your eggs Benedict, batch made in pitchers with whatever peach-adjacent product was cheapest. The delicate sophistication Cipriani intended got lost somewhere between Venice and your local brunch spot. Which is a shame, because when you make a proper Bellini, you understand immediately why it's named after a master painter. So let's talk about what actually goes into this thing. Because the ingredients list is deceptively simple. White peach puree and Prosecco. That's it. 2 ingredients. But like most simple things, the details are where mastery lives. First, the peaches. Not yellow peaches, white peaches. This isn't snobbery, this is chemistry and flavour. White peaches have a completely different profile than their yellow cousins. They're less acidic, more delicate, with this floral, honeyed quality that's almost perfumed. More after our break.
My name is Tom Sachs. I'm an artist in New York City. For nearly 2 decades, I have been collaborating with Nike.
Nike running is for runners, Nike basketball is for basketball. Nike craft is for everyone else.
When you puree them, they create this pale pink coral colour that's essential to the drink's appearance. Yellow peaches are more straightforward, more intensely peachy, but they lack that subtle complexity. They also create a bright orange colour that looks more like a smoothie than a cocktail. If you're making this properly, you're looking for white peaches in late summer, July through August in most places, when they're so ripe they've got a slight give when you press them. They should smell incredible, almost intoxicating. You blanch them for 30 to 60 seconds, shock them in ice water so the skins slip off, remove the pit, and then puree them until they're completely smooth. Push the puree through a fine mesh sieve to remove any fibres, and add just a couple drops of lemon juice to prevent oxidation. That's your base. That's what makes or breaks the drink. Now, Prosecco, not champagne. This is important. Cipriani used Prosecco from the Veneto region, probably from Conegliano Valdobbiadene, which is just north of Venice. Prosecco is made using the tank method, which creates softer, larger bubbles than champagne's traditional method. The alcohol content is lower, 11 to 12% versus champagne's 12 to 13, which makes it more appropriate for morning and afternoon drinking. The flavour profile is fruitier, with notes of pear, apple, and white peach that echo and complement the puree without competing. It's also more affordable, which matters when you're using 3 ounces per drink. Now, some high-end places use champagne, or Franciacorta, which is Italian sparkling wine made in the champagne method, and that creates a more refined, complex drink with finer bubbles and yeasty, toasty notes. It's not wrong, exactly, but it's not traditional. It's like using Kobe beef for a hamburger, technically an upgrade, but it misses the point of what the original was trying to be. For Prosecco, look for something marked Prosecco DOC at minimum, or better yet, Prosecco Superiore DOCG. You want Brut, which is the driest style, or extra dry, which is actually slightly sweeter than Brut, because Italian wine labelling makes perfect sense to absolutely no one. The wine needs to be properly chilled. We're talking 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, or everything falls apart. The ratio is where people argue. The Cipriani family claims 2 parts Prosecco to 1 part puree. Most cocktail books say 3 to 1. Some modern bartenders go 4 or even 5 to 1 for a less sweet version. The truth is, it depends on your puree. If your peaches are incredibly sweet and ripe, you can get away with less. If they're just okay, you might want more to get the flavour across. But generally, you're looking at about 1.5 to 2 ounces of puree and 3 ounces of Prosecco. That's your drink. No simple syrup, no lemon juice beyond what's in the puree to prevent browning. Certainly no raspberry puree or other additions, though Cipriani himself occasionally added a touch of raspberry for colour. The whole point is delicacy, restraint, letting the peach and Prosecco speak for themselves. Making this drink is where most people stumble, not because it's difficult, but because they overthink it or rush it. Here's what you need to understand. You're not mixing this drink. You're not shaking it. You're definitely not blending it. You're building it in the glass. And the method matters because we're trying to preserve carbonation while gently integrating 2 ingredients with very different densities. Start with a chilled champagne flute. Not a coupe, not a wine glass, a proper flute. The narrow shape preserves bubbles and showcases that gorgeous colour gradient. If your glass isn't chilled, you've already lost. Stick it in the freezer for 15 minutes before you start. Pour your peach puree first, about 1.5 ounces if you're being traditional, maybe up to 2 if you want it sweeter. The puree sits at the bottom because it's denser than Prosecco. This is important. If you try to add puree on top of Prosecco, you're just making a mess. More after our break.
Building a new product? Temez Labs takes you from napkin sketch to the App Store. Trusted by Fortune 500s for quality, security, and speed. Book your free strategy session at temez.ai.
Now comes the Prosecco, and this is where technique separates amateurs from people who know what they're doing. Tilt the glass to about a 45-degree angle, like you're pouring a beer, and pour the Prosecco slowly down the side of the glass. Not straight into the centre. That creates a massive foam head and knocks all the carbonation out. Slow, controlled, down the side. You're looking for about 3 ounces, filling to about 3/4 of an inch below the rim. As you pour, you'll see this beautiful thing happen. The Prosecco starts mixing with the puree through natural convection, creating this gradient effect where it's darker coral at the bottom and fades to pale champagne gold at the top. Now here's the debate. Do you stir or not? Traditional wisdom says 1 gentle upward motion with a bar spoon, bottom to top, to ensure some integration. The no-stir camp says the carbonation creates enough natural mixing and stirring destroys bubbles. I'm with the no-stir people if your puree is the right consistency, smooth but not too thick. The bubbles rising through the puree create these gorgeous convection currents that gently mix everything without you having to intervene. If you must stir, and sometimes with thicker puree you do, it's 1 motion. 1. Up from the bottom, slow and gentle, like you're trying not to wake someone sleeping. Then you're done. If you're adding a garnish, a paper-thin slice of white peach on the rim is traditional. But honestly, the drink is beautiful enough without it. Serve immediately. Not in 30 seconds, not after you make 3 more, immediately. Every moment that passes is carbonation leaving the glass. The mistakes people make are almost always about impatience or improvisation. Using yellow peaches because white ones aren't available. Just don't make Bellinis that day. Making them in advance and letting them sit. You're serving flat, separated disappointment. Pouring aggressively or stirring too much. Flat again. Using peach nectar from a bottle, which is too thin and too sweet and tastes like corn syrup with a peach rumour. All right. Thank you for joining us for the West 6 podcast. Drink responsibly, and if you had a good time, press follow and rate our show 5 stars. This is Scotty signing off. May your troubles be lighter than your cocktails.
Grep News. Tamez.